Hey guys, welcome back to Dumpster Fire Philosophy. I'm Ray, and today we're talking about something deep, some real. Healing from trauma, recovering from the past, and figuring out how to live in the present without losing your damn mind. I'm not trying to do the typical just let it go pep talk because, come on, it's a lot harder than just let it go. And if you are the target audience, which is neurodivergent peoples, um, you already know that your brain just doesn't fucking work that way. You can't just delete your memories. You can't just erase the effects that trauma has on your mind and your life. It's it's not magic. So today I'm going to give you some advice on how to recover from it. But disclaimer, I would like to say there are going to be a lot of trigger warnings in this podcast episode. Things including but not limited to like mentions of war and abuse and assault and stuff for the sake of defining what trauma is and common trauma, and personal anecdotes of mine of my trauma, which includes bullying, academic stress, mental health issues, and mental hospitals, and also self-harm and suicide. So if those are some things that you physically cannot listen to in any context whatsoever, I'm sorry, but you're kind of cooked. Anyway, let me jump into it. First off, we need to identify what trauma even is. Spoiler alert, it's not it's not a finite definition. It's not just war, abuse, rape, etc. It's not. It's just not. Trauma is any negative experience or event in your life that happened in the past that affects you negatively a long time later. Bullying can be trauma. Being scammed can be trauma. Being neglected by your parents, having bad friendships, bad relationships. Like anything can be trauma if it negatively affects you later on when everything's over. So don't even start thinking, well, this thing happened in my life, but and it affects me to this day, but I don't know if it's trauma. It is. If it negatively affects you to this day, even if everything's all over, it's still trauma. So now that I validated that the things that you're wondering if they're trauma are trauma, let's get into the actual advice. So, my first piece of advice is try to understand where your trauma comes from and even try to see it as something that would teach you something. I know that's really, really hard to do. But at the end of the day, a lot of the time, trauma can teach us things and help us to live a better future if we get over the mentally debilitating part and take the lesson out of it. Let me put this into perspective. Instead of just getting over it, give it a purpose. If you keep replaying a stupid painful memory, instead of like just fighting it, say, all right, memory, if you're gonna fucking stick around, at least teach me something. Just the mindset of my trauma teaches me a lesson, that can already sometimes make it less like debilitating. Let me give you an example. I have a lot of really, really bad exes. And instead of just dwelling on how horribly they treated me, what I like to do is I try to take the lesson from it. Let me give you a more in-depth example. So I once dated this guy. We are going to just name him R for short because that was his first name's initial. Um like before we dated, he was a freaking juvie prisoner. He was a troublemaker. He was very openly a sociopath, a narcissist, manipulative, etc. He was very proud about his sociopathy. But I was so love struck by him that I didn't care. And this, I was also Christian at the time. I do have an episode on the podcast about my trauma with Christianity, so you can go check that out. I think it's like episode 2. Yeah, I believe it was episode 2. But I dated this guy, and he love bombed the hell out of me. But then he started pulling away from me, and then he broke up with me on my 16th birthday. Yeah, petty, isn't it? But what that relationship taught me was, don't get into a relationship with somebody that you know was a super bad person in the past and you aren't completely certain that they've changed for the better. Because you see, I was only convinced that he changed for the better because he said he was Christian. I didn't actually take a second to look at how he acted. Instead, I was just so love struck and so focused on finding a boyfriend that I just fell for it. But now I know that I need to look at somebody's past and compare it to their current character. And learning that from my trauma helped me a lot to move on from that trauma. But then again, it does still leave a scar to me. Learning to find the lessons in your trauma isn't going to completely repair the scar, unfortunately. I still have the trauma to this day, and it still negatively affects my relationships because a lot of the time I can't tell if something is just normal affection or if it's love bombing. So, yes, I still have the scars from it. Now, this is not to say that your trauma is your fault. It's not. What I'm just saying is, one thing you can do is try to internalize a lesson from it or take something out of it. And if you seriously cannot find any lesson from it or any like life advice from it, then that's fine. Trauma comes in many shapes, sizes, and forms, and it doesn't always have to teach a lesson in the end. Sometimes it just happened. But one thing that's super important about trauma, and I know this is kind of tapping into cliche territory, but I promise you it's real, is one thing you need to understand about trauma is it is the past. It's very hard to understand that when you're in the heat of the moment, when you're having flashbacks and stuff. But when flashbacks pop up, the best thing I could recommend, at least from the way that I cope with my trauma, is to just completely dismiss them. Completely dismiss the past. Tell yourself that the past doesn't exist. Because it doesn't. See, the past is just a memory. It's not a real thing. The past is just a memory. And your trauma just happens to be a memory that affects you very badly. So when trauma starts creeping in, you need to remind yourself that it's just the past and you're not there anymore. And this is especially good for like trauma that is self-inflicted. Because yes, trauma can be self-inflicted. Maybe like you were a bad person at one point and caused some really bad things to happen. Like, I remember back in elementary school, I used to be a really big brat. And I was also a bully. But in middle school, I was still a brat, just in a different way. In elementary school, I bullied people, and in middle school, I was just, Debbie Downer. I was not a good person to hang around. I was not a good person. I did not have very morally right views on life. But a lot of the time, I still need to remind myself that that is not me. Elementary school me, middle school me, that is not me. The me now is the only person I need to focus on. If you start trying to belittle yourself because of the way you were in the past, just remember that that's not you anymore. That version of you doesn't exist. It is purely a memory. And it is very, very hard to remember that, especially in the heat of the moment. So, one thing I do recommend is distracting yourself. Because that is one thing that definitely healed me from my trauma is distracting myself when flashbacks came about. Best way to do this would be hobbies, especially creative and self-expressive hobbies, and definitely going outside. And honestly, taking care of your mental health, like as a whole, can just help you naturally heal from trauma. Even if it's not related to the trauma itself, healing your mental health in general can help you heal from trauma naturally. Another thing you can do, and especially if you're a neurodivergent motherfucking like me, is to make things more lighthearted. Take it in a more lighthearted way. I don't mean just reduce your trauma into a joke punchline. I don't mean that at all. That's not very good for you in the end. But just try to take it in a more lighthearted sense when you start getting too emotional about it. One thing that I do sometimes is I assign certain memories to like certain stupid names. Like for example, like when I start remembering the ways I would get bullied in middle school and high school, I'm like, not now, Brian, because Brian was the name of a kid who actually bullied me. And I mean, honestly, I understand if that part wouldn't work for you either. Maybe your trauma is just too, like, grim and morbid for that. But that is one thing that can work for some more, I guess, quote unquote, less serious trauma. And what I mean by that is not just like trauma that's less serious in the eyes of society. No, I mean like trauma that like affected you less seriously. I mean, even though bullying was my worst trauma, I'd say, I like to take the bullying in a more lighthearted way. I I don't know. Like for the less serious traumas, try to take it in a more lighthearted sense. I mean, joking about it can make you feel better, but don't go overboard with it. You should still approach your trauma with seriousness, but also approach it with lightheartedness when the time is right. It depends on your situation. Taking your trauma in a more lighthearted way can also steal some of its power away. It gives the trauma less power over you, I guess. So, we're going to use my bullying trauma as an example once again because it ought to be just the best example at this point because it's such a relatable thing for a lot of people, especially if you are a teenager listening to this podcast. In that case, number one, you are my target audience. Yippee. But two, it's going to be pretty relatable because I think every teenager has been bullied at least once in their life. Anyway, taking your trauma in a more lighthearted way can also take away its power because it shows that it's doesn't define your life. Like when I take the bullying trauma in a more lighthearted way, it defeats its power. It lessens the effects it has on me because taking it in a lighthearted way is basically like saying, yeah, that shit doesn't fucking matter anymore. You're just a random piece of trauma. And I humbly apologize if you heard the random notification from my phone during that recording. Yes, I just put it on silent. Anyway, let's move on. So, this next piece of advice is going to sound very cliche, but the exercise of grounding, it's cliche for a reason. And grounding, I'm not talking about your parent taking your phone away. Not that type of grounding. I really wish they would stop calling it a grounding when they take your phone away. But let me shut the hell up. And yes, I am saying that grounding is a good tool to get your mind off your traumatic memories. But I'm also here to remind you that your grounding exercises don't have to be long and complicated. If you were in therapy, you would know the exercise of name 5 things you see, name 4 colors you can see, name 5 things you could hear, blah blah blah. It does not have to be all that. I'm just gonna remind you now, only one sensory grounding thing. All you need is one. Like, just if you're having traumatic memories, just focus really hard on one stimuli. You can focus on more if you're able to, but you only need to focus on one. For example, the way your hoodie feels on your skin, the candle in the other room you're smelling. You can just do one simple exercise of point out how many purple things are in the room, etc. It does not have to be complicated. And I mean, I would have to say focusing more on just stimuli in general and even making your own stimuli is good for taking your mind off of traumatic memories, because especially for neurodivergent motherfuckers, stimuli is a very important thing for us. So if you just focus on one or two or whatever stimuli, you're good to go. And fidgeting also helps as well. Don't be afraid to do a little bit of leg bouncing or hand flopping. Nobody really notices in the end. And if they do, they're just a bastard who needs to worry about themselves. Like, look, stimming is not bad, okay? You can stim your way out of traumatic memories. And I know I'm talking about stimming right now, and stimming is typically something used for neurodivergent people, but I would just like to say if you are neurotypical, you can still stim, okay? It is perfectly fine for neurotypical people to use fidgets, to stim, to do things like that, because neurotypical people still need some stimulus too. I just need to point that out. That came out weird. Okay, let me shut the hell up and move on. And this next chunk of advice is more so on the self acceptance end. We've already talked about learning a lesson from your traumatic memories, making your traumatic memories more lighthearted to defeat their power over you, and stimming and grounding and distracting yourself from your memories. But now we're going to move on to some self acceptance for a bit. Here's something that we definitely should be hearing more. Sometimes self acceptance doesn't start on the inside. For a lot of people, looking inward can feel like opening a messy junk drawer or walking into our bedroom and just seeing a pile of laundry, trash, and bullshit. Sometimes you need to start on the outside. One thing I definitely recommend is like find like media and stuff that really makes you feel heard and seen. Best example of this can be like songs, movies, and stuff like that. Um, you can make things. You can make a playlist. You can make a watch list of movies or shows you can watch when you're feeling like ass. Sometimes representation can really help us cope with our trauma, realize that we're valid, and accept ourselves. Like songs with lyrics you relate to, movies that have relatable characters, animes and shows that have like relatable storylines. Like honestly, just anything that reminds you that you are not alone and that your trauma is valid, please do indulge. Like honestly, this could also tie into the distracting part, but it's also like better than just distracting yourself, because okay, let me just give you an example. Like Linkin Park songs. I'm literally wearing a Linkin Park t-shirt right now. I really like Linkin Park because the lyrics tend to be very centered around mental health and mental turmoil, something that is basically the root of all my trauma basically. Like things like mental breakdowns, feeling alone, feeling unloved, being manipulated and lied to. Those are all common themes in Linkin Park songs. So Linkin Park's songs tend to comfort me a lot because it makes me feel seen and heard. And I just really love Chester Bennington too. Like, I'm more of an old Linkin Park listener. I don't really listen to the new stuff. The new singer is good, but Chester Bennington is better. Rip Chester Bennington. You will always be remembered. But yeah. And just any like type of media or like things that represent your struggles, please indulge on them. Make yourself a playlist of all your favorite songs that make you feel seen and heard. I would definitely recommend rock music for people who are mentally struggling, especially with like internal stuff that people most of the time don't see on the outside, because I'm gonna be honest. I know it sounds like I'm indoctrinating you. That's because I am. But metal music is really freaking relaxing for some reason. I definitely recommend it. But obviously, it doesn't have to be metal. Just make yourself like a playlist, a watch list of shows and movies you can watch, playlist of music. Even go seek out content on the internet that makes you feel seen. But also, I'm going to warn you, for the content on the internet part, I would recommend finding stuff that has a more positive tone. Like stuff on the internet that promotes themes of like survival and overcoming more than just like the depression that comes with your struggles. Like testimonies and stuff. So that way you're not gonna get the negativity from it. And I'm pretty sure I have an episode somewhere around here that also can delve into this concept. Actually, I don't even remember what the hell I'm talking about. I know that I've talked about social media in my other episodes. I actually might make a whole other episode just on social media alone. So stay tuned for that. But anyway, let me shut the fuck up and say this. Media that makes you feel seen and heard. Please indulge. It's going to help you. One thing that would probably be even more helpful is getting involved in communities that share your experiences, like online forums, Discord servers. Um, just talking to people who have experienced similar things, it can really help you accept yourself and realize you're not alone. And on the other hand, it can also help you find a sense of comfort and safety. You can confide in these people for comfort and safety, but don't completely rely on other people for your comfort. You need to learn how to comfort yourself too. Because other people are not always going to be there 24/7. I really hate to break it to you. And also, other people have their own struggle to deal with, so don't completely rely on others for your comfort, but it is an option. Speaking of self acceptance, I also have a whole entire episode about getting rid of your insecurities and accepting yourself. So I'm going to link it in the description of this episode on Spotify and in the pinned comment on YouTube. So please go check that out as well. But I'm going to move on to another thing that is also about letting go. And one thing that is very important in letting go is you also need to express yourself. Self expression is a very big part about letting go. You can journal and like meditate and stuff. I do highly recommend meditating because that helps you just let your thoughts pass you by without getting overwhelmed. I know that sounds really cliche, but it's true. Meditating is pretty nice. And hobbies can help you distract yourself from the memories. Definitely recommend artistic hobbies. Cause swear to God, like art is like a freaking makeshift therapy for me when I don't have therapy for a while. Cause yes, I am in therapy. You should be too, honestly. Therapy is really good for you, but I'm not talking about that. What I am going to talk about though is allow yourself to crash out, but please do so in an appropriate manner. Don't let yourself like lash out at other people and whatever. But when you are alone, allow yourself to crash out. Like, you could smash ice cubes in the sink bowl, scream into a pillow, go outside into a deserted field and just like scream like a toddler and throw a tantrum. You can cry, you can scream. Just as long as you do it in an appropriate setting, you are allowed to crash out. Like, please, 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 I'm begging you, let yourself have emotions. Let yourself crash out. Please. Like, bottling the shit up is not going to help you at all. It's actually going to make your trauma worse. So, if your trauma is just getting really, really, really overwhelming, let yourself crash out. Like, if you are having a moment where your trauma is just like overflowing, just excuse yourself from a situation if you happen to be like with other people or in public. Go somewhere deserted and private and have a crash out, honestly. Like, I trust me, having a crash out on your own private time, it helps. It kind of does. Like, expressing your emotions just in general is very good for you. So please just express yourself. Like, if it's more like just like a small thing, then do something like journal, go practice a hobby or meditate to get your mind off of it. But if you really can't get your mind off of it, have a fucking tantrum. I swear. But honestly, just make sure that it's in a place where nobody's going to be like affected by it, because then you're going to run into another problem of people asking you what's wrong. And I mean, honestly, if you want people to ask you what's wrong, then go right ahead. But just allow yourself to feel, okay? Allow yourself to feel. Anyway, enough of me randomly jabbering, and I really hope that jabbering actually made some sense. But if it didn't, I really hope that this summary will. So the big takeaway is healing's not about just erasing your past and completely like invalidating it. It's about working with your past. Like turning your past into just a lesson to learn or just something that happened and you had to move on from. I'm going to summarize all the advice I gave. Number 1, try to learn a lesson from your past. Internalize what happened with your trauma. Try to learn a lesson from it. Try to take some advice from it. But if you can't, that's fine. Not all trauma has a lesson to be learned. But second piece is try to make it lighthearted and dim its power. Don't let your trauma have a bunch of power over you. Joking around, I know that people say that it's inherently bad, but it's not. It just has to be done in the appropriate situations. Make it more lighthearted, but also don't completely diminish the seriousness of it, or else that's going to tap into invalidating everyone else who experienced it. So just don't let your trauma have power over you. Third piece, stimulation and grounding exercises, they really do help to get your mind off of the thought. I don't know if I ever mentioned this in that portion of the episode, but honestly, just distracting yourself can really help. Like, whether it be grounding, stimming, or even going on and practicing an entire hobby to get your mind off of it, just self distraction does help you cope because you're not having your mind fully focused on the trauma. Fourth piece of advice, find representation in media. Find songs that you relate to. Find movies and shows that make you feel seen. Find social media posts that tell you that you're not alone and that you are able to recover. And also find other people you can talk to and find comfort and community in. Representation and community is really good for healing your trauma because it makes you know that you're not alone and you can recover. And the fifth piece of advice, self-expression is a very big part of healing. So please just let yourself feel your emotions. If self-distraction isn't working at any particular point, just go somewhere private and have a crash out. So let me put that in bullet points. Number one, learn from your trauma. Learn a lesson. Take some advice out of it. Learn why it happened. Learn something from it. Take some life advice from it. Two, make things more lighthearted and dim its power so that it doesn't affect you as badly. Third, distract yourself from the memories when they show up, be it simply stimming or grounding, or even something as complex as a whole ass hobby to get your mind off of it. Four, find representation in media and communities like songs, movies, social media, and communities, forums, etc. And fifth, I think the fifth is probably the most important part. Let yourself feel the emotions. Bottling it up is not going to help you, honey. It's just going to make you worse. But anyway, I really, really hope that my jabbering made any sense and it actually helped you. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it was helpful. Share it with a friend if you think they might need it. And that's it. Thank you for listening to Dumpster Fire Philosophy. I'm Ray, the host. Once again, I'm going to leave you with this message. You don't have to erase your trauma, you just need to work with it. You don't need to be fixed, you just need to adapt. Until next time. And another reminder, have a crash out! Feel your damn emotions. That's probably the most important part of this episode. I know I've said it 500 fucking times, but let yourself feel. Okay? Let me shut the hell up now.